we're going to do a little Q&A on sugar. So sugar in general is for sure one of the number one topics in nutrition and just in healthy eating in general that brings about a lot of confusion. There's a lot of information available online. There's always new research coming out, on long-term effects of things, and just there's always changing information. That's something about the nutrition world in general, and sugar tends to be one of those things that is super confusing. So one of the the first thing that I'll mention is that when you're making something like granola yourself, or anything, any time that you are making something yourself, which is one of the things that can make you feel empowered, right? By gaining some confidence in the kitchen, it makes you empowered and allows you to take control back over what goes into your body, right? Over your health, over the things that you're eating. So one of those things is to be able to control how much sugar goes into something. So something like granola that can, like I said, be a hidden source of added sugar, making it yourself allows you to modify how much sugar you're actually adding in there. So we're using a cup of maple syrup. And like I said, this granola is going to make like 5 cups of granola. So when you think about how much sweetener is actually in each serving of granola, I'm dripping on there, it's very little, right? So that's just one of the things that I wanted to mention here, is just about being able to kind of have more control over how much sugar is in what you're eating. So anytime that, this doesn't just mean always making everything from scratch either. This could be something also like buying plain yogurt instead of flavored yogurt, right? So flavored yogurts are also very high in sugar usually. They're making some now on the market that are a little bit lower in added sugars. So like I was saying, something like yogurt, if you buy plain yogurt versus a fruit flavored yogurt, you can control how much sweetener goes into it. So if you buy plain yogurt, you can sweeten it with maple syrup or honey or a fruit jam, but whatever it is, you have control over how much is going in there. So something as simple as trying plain yogurt instead of a sweetened yogurt is an easy way to, lessen your added sugar intake. That's one simple thing that you can try to do. So I'll go with first just a couple of actual questions that I got, and then we can dive into these topics a little bit more. So, is it healthier to use a little sugar instead of low-calorie sweeteners? So this is there's a few different points to touch on in this question, but it's one of the most common questions that I get, or some form of it, right? Should I just use a little bit of the real thing, or is it better for me to use these alternatives? So let me start by saying that generally, and I'm going to give this disclaimer just one more time that I wrote, but I will say it again. I cannot provide any personalized or individualized recommendations or guidance via this platform. So any information that I tell you now is for a general healthy adult. Okay. So my general response to any time you're asking me, is it better to have a little bit of the real thing versus the alternative? I'm going to tell you it's better to have a little bit of the real thing. Because it's the real thing. It's the real food. A lot of alternatives in general are not real food, right? They're either just ultra processed, or there's some part of it that came from real food, but then there's all this other stuff added in there that, some of these alternatives that are out there are not even really food, right? Your body doesn't even recognize it as food. Your body is meant to digest and absorb and metabolize any kind of food, right? Whether it's, junk food or real food, your body can process it. What your body cannot process is things that it doesn't recognize as food. So there's a couple of different alternatives for regular sugar. There's alternative sweeteners, and this would be something like Sweet and Low, Splenda, Equal, all of these things that you might also see as aspartame. And I just have some notes here, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm doing, because I have the questions written here. So that would be things like aspartame, sucralose, saccharin. So these alternative sweeteners have, like I was saying earlier, there's still a lot of research being done on a lot of this stuff, and we don't fully know all the long-term effects of, using too much of these alternative sweeteners, right? The other kind of alternative sweetener is sugar alcohols. So that would be things that you would notice on a label that end in OL. So like erythritol, malitol, sorbitol, all these things that end in OL are sugar alcohols. The sugar alcohols actually do come from food. But then in the process of, if it's a sugar alcohol that is added into something to make it sugar-free, then it's not actually a part of that food, right? It's being added into that food. So a lot of products that claim to be sugar-free are free of real sugar, but they have some sort of sugar alcohol or alternative sweetener that's in them. All of these things can have long-term effects. Sugar alcohols have known effects, not for everybody, but for some people, of causing GI distress. They can cause bloating and diarrhea on some occasions because they can't be fully digested by your body. So it can cause digestive distress. So for the general healthy adult, eating a little bit of the real thing, eating a little bit of real sugar is going to always be my recommendation. If you're somebody living with diabetes, that's a different story, right? And so the thing is the diet industry, right, kind of like picked up on how we're all so scared of gaining weight. We're so scared of being fat. And so it really kind of became like a diet industry, diet culture kind of thing to be like, oh, we can make a whole new line of sugar-free products that makes people, want to buy them because they think that it will help them to not gain weight, right? We're so fearful of eating too much calories in the form of sugar. So they basically capitalize on it and make products that are sugar-free. But most general healthy adults don't need to be sugar-free. Right? Sugar can be a part of a balanced diet. So what I would rather see is that we're having small amounts of the real thing. And if you're somebody who eats a lot of sugar, we would get to the underlying reasons of why you're eating so much added sugar. And we'll get into the discussion of what's added sugar versus what's naturally occurring sugars as well. But there's no reason why we can't start to understand why we are reaching for so much sugar, why we are craving sugar, right? Why we feel like we're addicted to sugar. There are underlying reasons for these kinds of things, and getting to that and understanding where your cravings are coming from. Something might be lacking in your diet. Maybe it's stress or emotion related, right? Sugar and tends to be in our comfort foods that we reach for when we need comfort. So looking into all these different reasons about why you might be eating so much sugar is the first step. And then talking about strategies for how you can cut back on adding so much sugar into your diet. Because once you get to the point that you are able to cut down on a lot of it, there's room for you to have a little bit of the real thing. There's room for you to have a teaspoon of real sugar in your coffee in the morning. Okay? So I hope that made sense. I'm always going to, my first instinct will always be to tell you that it's better to have a little bit of the real thing. And to try to better understand why your eating habits are the way that they are. because there's no reason that a general healthy adult should have to eliminate real sugar from their diet. There could be reasons why we're eating too much of it, and that's a very common thing. But so we need to address those reasons first and come up with strategies for reducing the added sugar in your diet so that there's room for you to have some of the real thing, to have some of the real ice cream, to have, like I said, a teaspoon of real sugar in your coffee, and not worry that it's, derailing you. Okay. Should the amount of fruit eaten per day be limited because of its sugar content, and is there a better time of day to eat fruit? Also, one of the top questions that I get is about fruit. So again, I can't stress enough that so many of the messages that we get around dieting and around healthy eating are so focused on weight that it detracts from the truth, honestly. So the diet industry and diet culture have made us believe that fruit is bad because it has sugar, right? There are lots of diets out there that I know just from people that I've spoken with who have done these diets that restrict fruit in your diet. Fruit is fruit, right? We know fruit is good for us. We know fruit has naturally occurring sugars in it, but fruit also has fiber and tons of vitamins and minerals that we need. So I would never suggest that you eliminate fruit from your diet, and I would caution you against any diet plan that does suggest that you eliminate fruit from your diet. My general recommendation is to have 2 servings of fruit per day. So that would be like one small piece of fruit, so like one banana, apple, a piece of fruit that you eat, or like half a cup of chopped up fruit, or half a cup of pieces of fruit. 2 servings a day, 2 to 3 servings. So, should the amount of fruit eaten per day be limited because of its sugar content? No. 2 to 3 servings of fruit per day. So I'm going to talk on that point a little bit. So the fruit in sugar is naturally occurring sugar. It's fructose. And I will say that sugar is sugar. When it comes to how your body metabolizes sugar, chemically, it's all the same. So no matter how it starts, no matter the source of it, when your body is breaking it down and it gets it into its simplest form to absorb it into your bloodstream, it's all the same. But when sugar comes from fruit, it's also paired with fiber. And that fiber slows down the absorption of the sugar into your bloodstream. So it doesn't raise your blood sugar levels as quickly. And I've mentioned this before, but being, having care for your blood sugar is not something that is only for people living with diabetes. That is something that we should all care about, because having balanced blood sugar affects our mood, our energy, our satiety, how full, we are between meals, so that we're not having these ups and downs of, sugar crashes and things like that. So your blood sugar control is important. So fiber plays a huge role in that. So that's a huge difference with the sugar that's in fruit compared to eating a cookie. A regular cookie, not a cookie that's made with high fiber flours and stuff. A regular cookie compared to a piece of fruit, right? So one thing is the fiber. The second thing is, like I mentioned, we're getting tons of nutrients from the fruit. Whereas if we're eating sugar from a cookie, and please don't take this as me saying not to eat cookies, I'm just using it as a comparison. If we're comparing a piece of fruit to a cookie, we're not getting really any nutrients from a regular Toll House cookie. We're getting joy and happy and comfort, and that's all great. We're getting nutrients with the fruit, right? So that's another big difference. What I will say is that when eating a piece of fruit, it's nice to it's beneficial, I should say, to pair a piece of fruit with some sort of protein and or fat. So this goes into a whole conversation about balanced meals and balanced snacks and wanting there to be a balance of carbohydrates, which is where sugar falls under, with protein and fat. So that again helps balance the effect of the carbohydrates on your blood sugar to help keep things stable. One of the reasons why you might have sugar cravings or feel like you're addicted to sugar, because this is something that I hear often as well, you know, I need some help to curb the sugar cravings. I always want sugar, you know, it's never enough. So there are a couple of reasons why you could be craving sugar and feeling this, you know, like you can't stop eating it. One of those reasons is because your meals are not well balanced, or your meals might be well balanced, but maybe you're not eating often enough. Maybe you need to add some snacks. If your body isn't getting a steady stream of energy from your meals and snacks, if it's not satisfied, it's going to crave sugar, because sugar is your body's quickest source of energy. So if your body doesn't have enough energy to work on, it's going to go, sugar, I need energy. So having balanced meals that leave you feeling satisfied can help to curb that issue. And another reason that you could be craving sweets is that you're restricting them too much. So like I was saying before, a very strict diet that doesn't allow you to have any added sugars can cause you to have sugar cravings, because your body literally starts to crave it because you're not giving any to it. So your body really knows what it needs, and that's what it's telling you. It's not that you have no willpower. It's not that you're crazy and you can't stop eating sugar. It's that your body genuinely needs it. Okay? So I hope that clarifies that a little bit. You're not crazy for, like, you don't have a problem that you have an addiction to sugar. There can be a few different things to look at, and again, that goes into looking, you know, more deeply into your lifestyle and what's going on in your life, and why, you know, these cravings could be happening. Okay, let me take a look. There was another part of that question. So is there a better time of day to eat fruit? So this is also something that, you know, that I hear not just about fruit, but, you know, there's a lot of rules out there about, you know, that you should stop eating at least 2 hours before bedtime, and, you know, just not eating like a super heavy meal before bed, all these kinds of things. First of all, you have to do what works for you, right? So everyone's lifestyle and schedule and things are different. So that's one thing on the rules about nighttime eating. When it comes to eating fruit, let's say you like to have fruit as a nighttime snack. You like to have something sweet at night. Again, like I mentioned before, I would suggest pairing the fruit with something else. So have like an apple and peanut butter. You know, have, or just, you know, a piece of fruit and some nuts, or, you know, a little yogurt with your fruit that has protein, like plain Greek yogurt with your fruit to add some protein there. Adding something with the fruit, like I said, helps to balance that rise in your blood sugar. The thing I'll say with eating at night, and why we hear these different rules about eating at night, is that if you eat something, right, and then you're laying down immediately after, you're not using that energy. And because sugar is what your body uses immediately for energy, if you eat something super, you know, super heavy in carbohydrates, super heavy in sugar before bed, your body might not have a chance to metabolize all of that before you go to sleep. And then what can happen if you don't use up all of that, you know, all of that sugar that's now in your bloodstream, if you're not using it for energy, it can get stored as fat. That doesn't mean that you're going to wake up the next day and be fatter. That's not what I mean. I mean like your triglycerides. Okay, so in your blood, that sugar that's not used right away gets stored, and it gets stored as fat, and that can raise your triglyceride level in your blood. So certainly you're better off eating fruit as your sweet treat at night than eating, a bunch of cookies that are really just pure sugar, right? That are just going to shoot your blood sugar right up. Another thing to consider with eating something sweet at night is, how does sugar affect you, right? Things impact us all differently. Sugar, for a lot of people, of course, gives you more energy. It makes you feel a little bit wired. So if you're someone who knows that it has that effect on you, it's probably not best anyway for you to eat something that has sugar in it so close to bed, because it can affect your sleep. So taking weight and everything out of the equation, if it's something that will affect your sleep, that's no good. So you want to consider other lifestyle factors as well. Consider other things, when you're thinking about, these kinds of questions, and how to, best lay out your eating habits. So there's no one better time of day to eat fruit. I would just think, be a little bit more, just think about the points, like I said, of it, possibly pairing it with some kind of protein and or fat to, to make it a bit more of a satisfying snack, and also to help slow the rise in your blood sugar levels. Okay, so talking also about, let's just touch on what is added sugar versus what is a naturally occurring sugar. And along those same lines, what is refined sugar versus unrefined sugar? And is unrefined sugar really healthier, right? So naturally occurring sugars are ones that exist in food naturally, without adding it in, without any processing. There's just sugar in the food. So that would be fruit. Yogurt and milk have lactose, right? So lactose is the sugar that is in milk products. Of course, starches. So we have sugar that is in starchy carbohydrates, like our potatoes and sweet potatoes and other root vegetables. And legumes, so like beans and lentils, have carbohydrates in them as well. So we can think of carbohydrates as sugar, as starch, and as fiber. So even you'll see on a nutrition label, your total carbohydrate is broken down into total fiber and sugar. And now with the new nutrition label, you actually can see grams of added sugars. So the added sugars, say you're looking at something like here. I have the Quaker Oats here, right? So Quaker Oats has a total carbohydrate of 27 grams, 4 grams of fiber, so that's a lot of fiber. Total sugars is only 1 gram, and that's the sugar that naturally occurs in the oats because of the starch. So includes 0 grams of added sugars. So there's no added sugar in the oats themselves. Versus if you look at a yogurt will have some sugar that is natural from the lactose, but if it's a sweetened yogurt, it will also have added sugar from whatever they're using to sweeten it. So it's the grams of added sugar that we really want to pay attention to. And that's the sugar that you're hearing about as being bad, right? That as Americans in general, we're eating too much added sugar. So added sugar is not just white sugar, right? Sugar takes a lot of different forms. So there's, of course, regular table sugar, right? Regular white sugar. But then there's all these other things that we see out there, including things like maple syrup and honey and coconut sugar. So those things like maple syrup, honey, coconut sugar, these are all considered unrefined sugars because, one, they're coming from a more natural source, right? Maple syrup is literally maple that is, extracted from a maple tree. Honey, we know, is, it's just natural harvested honey. But like I said before, even an unrefined sweetener is still added sugar, right? Like, you don't just drink maple syrup on its own or eat a spoonful. I mean, maybe you have a spoonful of honey sometimes if you have a sore throat, but usually we're adding it to things to sweeten it. Like if I'm having plain yogurt, I'm adding maple syrup or honey to the yogurt to make it sweeter. So in that sense, it's still an added sugar. Sure, it's less processed than some other sugars. It's less processed than table sugar that's been, gone through a lot of different processes to get from, a sugar cane plant to table sugar. And there might be still some trace minerals and things in these more unrefined sweeteners than you'll find in the refined sweeteners. However, they all, like I said earlier, they all chemically end up in your body the same way. So it's not something to get like super crazy about, never eating white sugar or, thinking that maple syrup and honey are not having as much of an effect on your body as white sugar. Once it's getting metabolized, it all acts the same way in your body. Sugar really is sugar to your body. So that's just a distinction that I want to make there. So it doesn't mean that maple syrup and honey and coconut sugar are healthier. It's still something, if you're considering it in the context of you're adding it to things, you still don't want to have excess. You still don't want to have too much. The thing with added sugars and why we get so concerned about them, aside, again, putting weight and all of that aside, is we're not really getting any other health benefits from a sweetener. We're not really getting any nutrient value from these added sugars. And if we have too much of them, the calories, right? Because sugar itself is a lot of calories, and they're kind of empty calories. That's where that term empty calorie comes from, is because it's just calories with no added health benefit for you, with no added nutrients, no fiber, nothing like that. It's just calories. So it's just straight up energy, right? That you use very quickly. Your body uses that right away. If we eat too much of these sugars, the calories from those added sugars can displace calories from more nutritious foods, right? So we just want to make sure that we're having a good balance of still being able to have some of these added sugars, but not to the point that you're having, hundreds of calories worth of added sugar a day. We want to make sure that the majority of the calories we're eating a day is coming from food that's providing nutrients to us, that's providing what our bodies need to thrive. So I think that's about it on that. That's just an important point that I wanted to make on those. And of course with sweeteners like honey and maple syrup too, you're getting a totally different flavor. So sometimes I like to just use these, if we're speaking in culinary terms, when we're talking about cooking, it can be nice to use these sweeteners in place of just regular sugar because it adds another dimension of flavor to a dish as well. So that's another thing to consider. So sometimes if I'm using maple syrup in a recipe, like even with this granola, right, we're using 1/3 cup of maple syrup, but the maple flavor goes really well with the fall, with the pumpkin and the cranberry, right? So rather than just adding regular sugar in here, or like brown sugar or something like that, I get the flavor of the maple in that, which I love. So it's not that it's only coming from like a health perspective, it's also coming from a flavor perspective. So that's why a lot of times too I talk about, you like if I have a recipe that has maple syrup, I'll say you can use honey instead, because some people prefer the flavor of honey and some prefer the flavor of maple. So that's just another thing to consider. I just will leave this, I will end this with a little message that rather than rather than focusing so much on the grams of sugar that you're eating in a day, or the number of calories that you're getting from sugar in a day, rather than focusing so much on the numbers, I want you to think about where your sugar is coming from every day. What are some of the sources of added sugar in your usual diet? And start to think about, are there ways that I can start to modify this? Don't try to change everything overnight, right? We want to start with small things that we can change, little things that we can modify by week. Things that we can modify one at a time by week. Maybe it's, trying plain yogurt instead of a sweetened yogurt and trying to sweeten it yourself. Maybe it's, trying to cut down. Maybe you use like 3 packets of Splenda in one drink or something, in 1 cup of coffee. Maybe you can cut down on the Splenda, right? Little things that you can start to do. Another thing I'll mention is that our taste buds do adapt over time, and sometimes it can be hard to get used to eating and drinking things that are less sweet. But over time, as you slowly start to cut back on the sugar, you will adapt. Your body adapts to it. Your taste buds, your brain, everything adapts to it. And you will start to, at first your coffee will be like, this is so bitter. But eventually that 1 teaspoon of sugar in your coffee will do the trick. And you won't want something so sweet, right? You'll start to eat things that are super sweet and you'll be too sensitive to it. You'll think, oh, this is too sweet for me, something that you used to eat all the time. So small steps. So that's my challenge for you, is to just start thinking about the different sources of sugar in your diet, specifically added sugar. So thinking about things like granola bars, protein bars. Protein bars are a huge one that are filled with hidden sources of sugar. Cereals, like instant oatmeals, peanut butters, right? Like Skippy and Jif, gotta love them, but they have added sugar in them. So maybe that's something. You can switch from Skippy or Jif and try a natural peanut butter that doesn't have added sugar in it. That's a simple swap. So little things like this, if you can kind of keep track of where your sources of added sugar are in your diet and what are some simple things that aren't going to be like life altering, what are some simple things that you can do one at a time per week? Set small goals for yourself and just start paying attention to, to how it changes. Like I said, your taste buds will change. You'll notice that you're not searching for something so sweet anymore. The other takeaway is to make sure that you're eating balanced meals and that you're satisfied between your meals. And if you're not, we either need to look at making your meals more balanced or adding some snacks into your day to help you feel satisfied throughout the day. So you're not having these ups and downs in your blood sugar, your energy is stable, your mood is stable. All of these things are really important. And that's it. If this is something that you feel like you need more personalized, individual attention with, or you need help setting these goals and making these changes and implementing this in your life and feel confident that you're doing the best thing for you, I would love to hear from you. Like I said, I cannot provide any personalized or individualized recommendations unless you are a client of mine. So if this is something that you need more guidance and support and accountability with, I would be happy to talk to you. You can shoot me a private message on here, send me an email, and I would love to talk to you about how we can work together.